So that was just to sort of give you a bit of the context in which we're working and thinking about. I mean, there are many aspects to the project which I'll sort of talk about now, but because we're also dealing with creative pedagogies and working with young people, it's important to sort of situate that context, because we're working with our predominantly waste workers, and the young people are the children of those waste workers, the people that we work with in the NGOs and in our sort of lab, which I'll come to, have also come through, have been former waste workers in various forms. So we're very much embedded in the sites and the situation of waste work. If I just... Yes. So, I think, given the sort of small number of people in the room, and I'll sort of move through aspects of this work. If at some point you want to interrupt me, ask a question, or open up and take the conversation in a particular direction, as in we could talk about what you've just seen in terms of the actual flows of waste, informal waste management across the city and how that works, as well as the lives of those people, or we could sort of focus much more on the kind of the creative pedagogies through the lab. So just to sort of set the scene, and political ecologies of waste in Mumbai, like many mega cities throughout the global south, reveal a sort of complex economy of informal waste work and the hidden narratives of the lives that sustain it. This presentation therefore explores that aspect of invisibility. That's to say that the contribution made by waste workers, as I've said, is informal. That means there's no state intervention at all, and most of that work is largely invisible, despite the fact that India, through this sort of process, has one of the highest recycling rates in the world. The actual capture of, I mean, we're looking predominantly obviously at plastic, and we've talked a lot about the hammer, we've talked a lot about materiality, and you know, I hope that kind of gives a sense of the kind of the excess of materiality that you kind of see in this film. So the project then confronts the question of waste and the biopolitics of disposability, primarily through the creation of C13 Lab, which is an experimental design and learning space for Dharavi's young people in partnership with an organisation called Acorn Foundation. And that includes a platform for artists and designers to co-create with waste workers across the informal waste management sector. And as such, then it's recognising obviously the ecology of knowledges that are underpinning waste work. So just to, what you see then in the film is how people are tapping or using various methods to segregate up to 8 to 10 polymers. They probably have a knowledge of about 20 different polymers that they can identify, some by bending, tapping, smell, taste, sometimes tapping the teeth, whatever. There are different ways of doing that, as well as this kind of encyclopedic knowledge of this kind of plastic waste flows, which is of course absolutely everywhere you're sitting on plastic. It's so much embedded in every aspect of our life. So every single item, in effect, that can be recycled because of the economies of waste in somewhere like India, ends up kind of going through these recycling flows, whereas in the West there's simply, I mean, you can see the level of kind of breaking down and segregation is just not possible, either through a mechanized process, but because it's just not economically viable in this context. So just to sort of situate you, Dharavi, which is one of the largest informal settlements in Asia, is 2.1 square kilometers. This is in the middle of the city, housing approximately more upwards of 1 million inhabitants, as it's said in the film. And the red dot, red arrow there rather, shows where our new lab and Acorn's learning space is situated. The yellow site is 13 compounds. That's the main recycling hub in the city, and it was the central hub until more recently, where it's now become a kind of node within several other recycling centres around the city, as well as its gradual migration to other parts on the city's fringes. as a result of its central location, it's also it's an incredible prime site of real estate development. So it's been, so as you've seen in the film, we're sort of really situated in this particular landscape, next to and within the spaces of recycling. And the project, or again, some of the things that we could talk about or in and out of, sort of some of the things that the project sort of covers the policies of representation. That's the use of media images or destructive stereotypes, or me standing here talking to you about the situation in India and what that means in an academic context, so kind of unpicking that, if you like, or the problems of that idea of representation. Policies of disposability, which we'll come back to, knowledge politics, again, who's telling the story, which I think we've also thought about that today, and how young people should be sort of telling the stories about their own lives and seeing themselves in future narratives. This has only been made possible really with a partnership, with long-standing community partnerships. This sort of level of participation and co-production, again, yeah, it's only possible through these sort of long-standing partnerships. Acorn Foundation India were set up to provide welfare for rag pickers and provide informal education to women and children living and working in the waste management economy. Initially, Acorn wanted to sort of unionise or collectively organised waste pickers to sort of, or waste workers to move towards ideas of a kind of green economy, recognising as green economy workers. That, for many different reasons, is very difficult in practice due to the kind of precarity of individual lives, and so the logic then was to implement change. Then was to look at the next generation, and so to keep the children of waste workers out of the cycle of child labour and keep them out of waste work predominantly. And trying to find impact in that way. So that's how this kind of approach to a kind of creative learning space, given that most of the children have poor literacy, have fallen out of school at a very young age, and are often having to do work or contribute to the social reproduction of life in the household. So it's quite a contested space, Dharavi, not least it came to international sort of light through a controversial redevelopment plan which was led by Mukesh Mehta, which has been on and off the cards and has, over the last sort of 2 decades, has gone through various failures, and Dharavi is still there resisting this process, but a lot has been made about that. Other things are Slumdog Millionaire, which obviously which is where some of you may know this place from, where it came into the media. And that sort of spurred an already minimally existing slum tours, but that really kind of created this space of slum tourism in Dharavi, which had a particular focus on that green corner, the recycling centre, because it's one of the sort of more unpleasant or harsh-looking ideas of what urban poverty could look like or what slum life looks like. That's the scene of them running down this pipeline. Pipeline's a recurring trope, which we will come to, but it runs, it's a recurring trope because it carries all the water from north to south Bombay, and of course this particular area, the 13 compounds where the recycling was done, obviously all the hutments were on top of this kind of water pipeline with no access to water, so you can kind of get the sort of symbolic, site of symbolic struggle, if you like. So this particular site, obviously, it is perpetuated in, if you type in slum or Dharavi or India slum, you always get, in a Google search, you'll always get these kinds of images, and you'll get this recurring theme of the pipeline and emaciated or poor-looking children standing on the pipeline. Or images like this that kind of picture sort of very dystopian, kind of dark, dirty place. And then, of course, that sort of representing Mumbai as a world-class future city of kind of technology and high finance. services, and you've got a sort of global city discourse that that Mumbai is kind of part of, is sort of disrupted then by this kind of media representations. On the one hand, it wants to stigmatise these places as slums so it can force development, but at the same time it's a kind of stain on the urban imaginary, this kind of high-tech